Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Binford Sloan, and I'm a solutions consultant with BusPlanner. And previously, before that, I was a transportation director for about 24 years and in the industry, and have a lot of admiration for everyone that's out there listening today and what you do for children all over North America. And it's truly a privilege to be part of this special team at BusPlanner as we continue to want to just share our stories that we have. Today, we have a great partner here and a member of our family, Mr. Chris Rayneri. He's the supervisor of centralized routing for Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and just a privilege to be here. Chris, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Binford. As Binford was saying, I'm the supervisor of centralized routing in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We've been a bus planner customer for about 5 years, it feels like. A very happy customer, and we're one of those customers that have taken advantage of all of the great tools that Bus Planner has made available to make not just our jobs easier, but also the lives of the students, the schools, the school board members, as well as the region in making the task that we do, which is a difficult one, make it a lot easier and seamless for them. So for that reason, I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of that.
Awesome. It's great that you're here. So today we just want to talk about a few things. We want to talk about, your story, Chris, and there at Miami-Dade and County Public Schools and what you all did from that initial implementation of the bus planner system. And then from there segue into those efficiencies that you all saw in the first year. And then, in the subsequent years after that, in years 2 and 3, and then what you would see as operational wins, and then the real story here is what you've done with workflow. We'll round that out through the agenda. I would like to say to those of you that are on the call, this is just an informal conversation. So as you're listening, we are going to have a period there where you're going to be allowed to ask us questions. But if something comes to mind, please feel free to type it into the chat box, because we definitely want to make sure that we answer that for you, whether it's throughout our conversation or there towards the end. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about, again, you guys started out with Bus Planner. I remember it was in the fall of 2019, and very vividly recall as we came down and we actually had the first training session with your team there. It was after Thanksgiving, so it was the first part of December of 2019, and then after that we did a second round of training in January before the COVID shutdown. But what was it like from where you sit, just getting into a brand new routing system with everything that you deal with that, and then the pandemic started?
Yeah, it's incredible that it's been 5 years. So right now we're doing this virtual presentation, and back then this wasn't really a common thing to have uh, doing training or anything like that over the internet. Uh, we started out December of 2019, and we started out our in-person training, and that was great. We had the software deployed. We were all using it. I remember we were all and actually in this facility. We did that December and January,
Hmm.
and then March of 2020, the pandemic hit, and we were all caught off guard. Schools were closed. We did go through training virtually, and we were able to get our feet wet, you could say, as far as learning the application and dealing with all the changes that were happening in the world that we were living in, um, the new world, you could say. But we were able to, when you're in the routing department, student assigning and building bus runs, in theory, it's all the same regardless of where you're at, what software you're using, or what school district you're in. What makes the difference is how you utilize the tools within that software and the availability of them. And that was one of the reasons why we had chosen to go to Bus Planner. We had a previous vendor, which was a large vendor as well, and they weren't keeping up with the requirements that we needed in the school district or providing the service. So the district decided to take an exhaustive approach to looking at software vendors, and not just the routing portion of it, but the whole suite of applications and how it would benefit us to make us more efficient. That's one of the things that transportation centers are always looking to do. How do you make things more efficient without impacting students directly? You may make a route more efficient because you've consolidated, but if you're making students ride on a bus 30 minutes longer than they should, that's not really considered efficient. And BusPlanner had the tools within the BusPlanner Pro software, as many of us know, if when you use the application to try to improve that. Uh, but it was all of the other tools in addition to BusPlanner Pro, right? The main routing software that really stood out to us. And as you know, we don't just use BusPlanner Pro. We don't just use workflow. We use other applications that
Hmm.
have made our operation a lot simpler. And it's got to be made easier, not just because you don't want to have excessive employees, it's that you just can't find them. You can't just find 200 bus drivers. You have to uh, have an organization based on the labor force that you're able to attract. And fortunately, it was all perfect timing uh, for us to be able to migrate into Bus Planner Pro.
Yeah, I recall, in the very beginning, when you all were going through this process, there was a lot of those, back and forth and wanting to again make sure that, Bus Planner was going to be able to do everything, that, your school district required of us, right? And so I remember we had some healthy discussions there at your office about it, and just, again wanting to make sure that everything was going to work out, in the onset. So, but
And
yeah,
and
so.
and to add to what you're saying, as you remember, we have a very senior workforce in the routing
Mhm.
department. Everybody's been here 25 years. I've been here 17, and I'm practically one of the newest. But the hesitancy of change is very difficult, but the software was very user friendly, as all of the applications have been. So it's been something that I think the critical word is seamless, and everything that you do and you implement has to be seamless as far as who is going to be using it and who is going to be receiving the information. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, very good point. Because again, it's a lot of different stakeholder groups that you are responsible for as a service delivery operation, right? And so, all of this definitely plays into that. So, Chris, what were some of those operational efficiencies that you all saw? Again, and we can start with that first year, right? And then maybe from there, what you saw in, years 2 and 3, what some of the different
Right.
things.
So I can tell you that from what I looked in my records, we had 965 bus routes when we first started with Bus Planner, and we had
Mm-hmm.
gone through years of reducing bus routes. Our school district took the approach about 8, 9 years ago that we were only going to assign students that requested transportation. So for the first 3 or 4 years that we were doing that, it was a very labor-intensive, paper-driven process. And that's what made it very difficult. When we started out with Bus Planner, we were down to 965 routes. And slowly, by being able to compile that information of who wants a bus, what students are going to receive transportation based on a direct request, uh, how many students are we going to actually assign versus the ones that are totally eligible. This school district has 65, 70,000 students that one way or another are eligible for transportation, yet we're only assigning 44,000 students that are requesting transportation. If a student wants transportation, they need to request it. And it has to be done in a clear, concise way, the same way every single time. Before Bus Planner, this was done via fax, via email, via phone call. via scanned document. We actually had a form drawn that was a transportation request log, and our faxes would be whirring all day long receiving these documents. And then you would have to manually hand it to whoever the route technician is. This became even more labor intensive because I have two centralized routing offices. So if you received one over here, you'd have to send it to the north office. So we always needed a way that would make that task a lot easier. So we did get down to 720 bus routes year over year by deploying more automated ways of doing that. We also reduced the number of bus stops. We used to have about 15,000 bus stops. Our last count is 12,700. So that reduced the number of bus runs and reduced the number of bus routes. It is more work to do that, and we find that it constantly keeps us busy to make sure that things are running as simplified as possible. When we do our state surveys that are conducted October and February, we use that
Hmm.
data as well to consolidate and rebuild runs where necessary. So the improvement that directly occurs to students is that their ride time is reduced. By us eliminating those bus stops, we reduce their ride time. We're able to consolidate bus routes a lot better. And that in turn, uh, because we're matching the number of routes to the number of drivers, makes things a lot more efficient operationally. This is nothing different than any other school district encounters on a day-to-day basis where you're doubling and you're having to run operations uh, based on who's calling out that day because you don't have enough drivers. By us taking the lead on that, we've been able to make operations flow a lot easier, minimize telephone calls and complaints from parents, principals, the school board, etc.
So you've essentially then you've reduced your operations. It sounds like about a fourth, about 25%, right? So instead of being reactive to the world around you, you've taken the more proactive approach, right? You want to get out ahead of it, which is
Correct.
sounds like it's been a win-win for everyone there within the department, for your schools that you're serving, your families, and the students themselves, because they're not losing instructional time. It sounds like you're able to get them to school on time and get them home, which is win-win everywhere.
Correct. And, it goes without saying that this is a department that 15 years ago had 50 route specialists,
Hmm.
route technicians. When I started, there was 25, and we're down to 15. And those route technicians are very active doing their job using the software to the fullest of the capabilities. What was never addressed before is that initial request of transportation or other services, the
Hmm.
inefficiency of doing that through telephone, fax, email, scanning documents and emailing them, and that getting lost in the shuffle. And that's something that we addressed uh, 16 months ago when we started developing the workflow forms that we needed to streamline our operations and make things a lot easier. Because I think what ends up happening in transportation centers, particularly you see that in dispatch offices in the morning and the afternoon, is uh, our departments are not set up to be call centers. We're not a call center. We don't have call center telephones. We don't have a queue of calls waiting to be answered. Our folks are supposed to be doing their job, which is to assign students, build bus stops, build bus runs, take care of the special education and other vulnerable populations as quickly as possible. They can't do that if they're on the telephone 5, 6 minutes, 10 minutes every time a parent or a school calls.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And again, it just shows how you all have just transformed how you provide services. Because I remember, in the beginning, you had, 23, 24 people on staff. Now you're down to 15 because again of these new proactive measures that have occurred. So, kudos to you all for all of that. So, Chris, what are some suggestions that you have for people listening today that are out there looking for some different operational efficiencies, through their routing system? I mean, where do you start, right? And what are some key things that you could suggest to them that they look for in their journeys?
Well, the thing is, and I mention this a lot when we have internal meetings, is that anytime you make a decision, anytime you're looking to do something to improve, it has to be actionable.
Hmm.
There has to be a way of doing what you want to do that has some kind of an impact, where people will notice how you did it before, how you do it now, and slowly they forget how bad it used to be on how they
Right.
did things, right? And the next step in the progression that we had in this department on simplifying things was getting everybody away from using the telephone, the fax, the emails for making requests, right? For making these
Hmm.
repetitive requests, they're redundant. When a parent calls in, especially in the beginning of the school year, the story is usually the same. They need their child to get on a bus as quickly as possible, or they're going to lose their job. And they don't realize that there is 5,000 other parents that are also calling at the same time. So our original goal was, how can we stop receiving telephone calls, right?
Hmm.
And it's not just the inefficiency. When somebody calls over the telephone, I think school districts and transportation departments also have this in the back of their mind, that you don't know who is calling. You don't know if that is the authorized parent that is calling or somebody that is not authorized, and they're trying to get information from you. So I don't want my staff answering telephone calls all the time of folks that are not authorized. In addition to that, you have the schools giving out the phone numbers to the routing department. So that also takes up time that can be used to be assigning students or taking care of issues. So, to sum it up, I think it's very important because we all have the same issues in transportation departments. And fortunately, BusPlanner has solutions for some of these issues. Is that when you come up with a solution, it has to be actionable, it has to have that direct impact.
Yeah, fully agree. I remember in my days when I was a transportation director, and when we went to Bus Planner, at Nash County Public Schools in North Carolina, recall that when we started putting out, some of this technologies, right, with the where parents could log in to look at information, schools were able to access it, and at that time we were like a lot of places, we were putting out, student information, on big charts that would be hung up at the front door of every school building, or it would be published in the
Or
newspaper.
supermarkets,
Yeah,
or posted
supermarkets.
at a supermarket.
That's right. That's right. And or we would do the mailings, right? You remember the mailings and stuff like
Right.
that. And after going to this, I mean, we just like you, we saw the drop in the phone calls. It just fell off the cliff because now people were able to access that information real time to see those assignments. They could even take it one step farther and, get it sent to them automated through subscription services that Bus Planner has. And so it was just a win-win on a lot of different levels that, we saw as well. So I'm glad that, it's worked out well there for Miami-Dade. What are some of the other things that you have seen going the last few years? You mentioned, reducing the number of route buses by about 25%. So I'm sure you've done some things there, in the routing setup, in addition to, the way that you schedule people to ride and things. What are some other things maybe that you could suggest some insight
Well, I
to help people?
think we slowly become very data driven by force,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
by trying to be as efficient as our labor force allows. And internally, what we've done is we've created workflow forms for all of the
Mm-hmm.
multiple processes, not just to reduce the number of stops and the number of routes, but also to increase the time that students take to get assigned to a bus, or special education students,
Mm-hmm.
where at the beginning of the school year, we have thousands of requests that come in, and you have to be able to tackle all of those requests one at a time. And the faster you're able to assign those students, the faster those students are able to actually get to school. A lot of students are changing schools or registering on the first day of school. A lot of schools, to save money, they don't have staff working at the front office, right? So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we did is we opened up workflow forms so that parents are able to make requests from their home for transportation to schools that they're not even registered to, right?
Right.
Before the school even knows. That happens a lot at schools of choice or magnet programs where they're going to be assigned. They've been accepted to two or three programs, and only the parent knows which program they're going to accept. Well, we receive that request ahead of time, and we're able to get that student assigned usually on the first day of school if they send it 2 weeks before. So those are all things that have made us more efficient using BusPlanner workflow. We've also been able to do things that enhance student safety, by the way. We have a workflow form that was created for special education students,
Uh-huh.
and those students, the parents, uh, whoever is authorized to accept that student, will actually show up on the GPS tablet that we have on the bus when those students are also put in. And that has reduced or eliminated the chance that you're dropping off a student at a wrong home just because they see an adult in the front yard. Now
Right.
we have who the names of those authorized to receive the students are. Um,
So, so for those of you that aren't aware, workflow that Chris has been talking about is an online form management tool that we have, and this system is an extension of the routing platform. So it works within his Bus Planner Pro database. It also works within the Bus Planner web application, where, whether it's families or schools themselves can make different types of requests. And the last piece there that Chris was talking about, where we can take these online forms and they can actually be pushed out to our driver navigation app that he was referring to there for his special needs students. But this is what I really liked about workflow when I was introduced to it years ago, is that number one, it's customizable. So you can design these forms around your local school district community, and then you can process map them out accordingly, right? So Chris, in your district there, as I understand, a lot of your forms are coming directly from the parents, and then they go to the routing team that's responsible for that school where their student goes, or it could be a set of forms that are coming directly from the schools, like you were mentioning with your special needs students that are coming into your team, right?
Correct.
Um,
So
and yeah.
I have 5 forms that are provided accessible just to parents, right? So parents, when they
Mm-hmm.
log on to the parent portal, they
Right.
actually have access to these 5 forms. They're mainly requesting transportation as a regular student, requesting
Mm-hmm.
transportation to certain public park programs that we have. We also have forms for certain magnet programs that have depot stops. So these forms, this is not like having Google Forms
Mm-hmm.
where it's just a form with blank spaces. Okay, the forms are actually very intelligent. For example, the
Yes.
depot stop forms, when they select the correct magnet program and only those magnet schools show up, it will show them all of the possible bus stop locations that that parent can choose even before they're registered to the school, because they you access it after you've logged on as a parent, so it
Mm-hmm.
knows who the students are. So um, when you go and select that bus stop, right? You're essentially doing most of the routing work for us. But what also happens is that parent is not going to go visit the school to request transportation and make a line. You've also eliminated work that somebody at the school has done. And although we've only had this application for 15, 16 months that we've been doing workflow, it is an integral part of the job that we do. And it is as critical as the routing software. All of the requests that come from schools, and we receive thousands of requests the first month of school. When we did a tally of the number of requests we received almost 9,000 requests. And uh, about 30, 40% of them were directly received from parents. Um, the parents see their information, they receive communication that they've submitted it, an immediate communication. They get a thumbs up that when they submit it, they get an email saying a custom message that we send them, letting them know it's going to take 2 or 3 days to assign their student, and they'll receive a follow up. You could have it set up so it sends them an email when my routing staff actually looks at it, and you can have an email sent when they've approved it and letting them know to go look at BusPlanner Web for their assignment. Like the communication is from cradle to grave. It is a complete communication, something they've never received before. The same thing happens to schools when they make their requests. So it's gotten to the point where this is as critical to them. This is their first go-to place when they're looking for transportation. And the parents are also aware that this is where they're going to go to request transportation. And all of this is done with zero human intervention.
Right.
When a school or a parent makes their request, my route technicians have their 15, 20 schools set up within workflow. So it goes directly to them. They receive an email letting them know that they've received the request. Okay. And they know to go in there and take care of it as soon as possible. And on top of that, when it's an ESE student, we're able to see because the form is defined as a special education form, and we know to assign that student as quickly as possible.
So you all you officially started using Bus Planner Workflow in May of 2023, correct?
Correct. It's
And
been 15 months, 16
15
months.
months. And to date, you have how many forms have been run through this system?
When I checked, I believe we were at almost 40,700 some odd forms. And I didn't mention this, but you're able to audit all of the forms received, all of the
Yes.
forms that have been denied, who's received the most forms, who's
Hmm.
completed them, which ones are still in process, which ones are aging where they're taking too long to take care of. Um, I quickly went in and took a look at how many forms we received the first month of
Hmm.
school. I had received 8,598 forms, 2,573 of the forms were parents directly requesting it, and 3,500 were schools requesting it. So I
Right.
expect that next year, the first month of school, that balance is going to go more towards parents requesting. And you could see that subsequent months, there's less forms received, right? Because
Hmm.
things start
Right.
to settle down.
Right.
But
Right.
we have forms for many, many different functions. And I would say 95% of the functions that we do in the routing department and the school district have been included into workflow.
Yeah.
We've had them create them, they're custom forms. And
Hmm.
here's another part of this that's also critical, that these forms that we've created, or that you've created, BusPlanner has created, that we've designed for our use, these forms are basically public domain forms that any of the schools that BusPlanner serves are able to go and load those forms into their workflow and then get them customized for their use,
Right.
right?
Right. And so another great thing with the forms that I used to really like in my old district was the fact that once you were finished with the process, you could take the entire you could be attached to that student record. in BusPlanner
Correct.
Pro. And so it would, and what that did for you, the power of it, it kept that entire audit trail from when the parent made the initial request, the date, the timestamp, any communication that was sent back to them through automation, template letters, approvals, deferrals if it had to be passed, and it kept everything in one spot. And so you were able to
Correct.
use it. We've got, some places where they actually require, attachments to go with those uh, workflow forms, right? That can also go to the student record. The other important thing here for people to know is that you can configure in BusPlanner workflow if you want the form to be what we call a private form, right? Chris has referred to some as public forms, in which you can, but we can also have them private. So that way they're only available to specific users in an organization, right? They wouldn't be available. So again, we've tried to just give all kinds of flexibility for everyone out there. But yeah, this is really great. And Chris, I just got to say, I mean, May of 2023, and you've already got over 27 forms that you have designed. You're the champion. I mean,
I,
you're the rock star in this.
I like easy work. It's a lot
Yeah,
easier for you to address a problem and get it resolved, right? Which we did
right.
with workflow, and not have to deal with constant telephone calls and uh, you know uh, all of the other issues that happen from doing the actual job. And you mentioned earlier about deferring and
Hmm.
referring. For
Yes.
those that aren't familiar with the back end of workflow, uh, this is basically customer relationship software where it is not only just handling the communications of somebody making a request of some kind. It is staying in the system. The route technician is owning the receipt of what happened, right? Of what was requested.
Hmm.
And if necessary, they're able to refer it to their supervisor, to the route manager, to the mapping specialist, depending on what type of form it is. If it's a parent that's requesting transportation and their student isn't assigned to that school, you don't deny it, you defer it, as you said. And what we do is we defer it to a week later. And when they defer it, the parent receives an email letting them know it's been deferred. And most likely it's because the student isn't registered to the school yet, or there's an address situation. It sends the parent an email notifying them. Parents appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that something is not being lost in translation, as they say. So this actually makes sure that our stakeholders, whether it's parents or schools, are satisfied. And it's done a great job. I mean, this is, like I said, an integral part of the routing
Hmm.
process, of the routing solution that BusPlanner has provided Dade County Public Schools.
Chris, did you see, I mean, when we first started working together, did you envision all of this back then, transforming the way that it has today for your organization?
So before we went with BusPlanner, we had a previous software vendor, and they were a leading software vendor. I had made a presentation to them about something similar to this, of being able to request transportation electronically and how it would simplify the work that was done. And I had given them that presentation. They had come down here, and I distinctly remember speaking to you outside of our facility. We were talking under a tree, the famous tree. And I
Hmm.
told you the problems that I had inherently, because the work of routing is not, it's easy. You can assign, anybody could assign a student, right? Anybody can go and build a bus run or build a bus route. It's everything else that is 95% of the work, right? Because you could
Right,
assign a student, not a problem.
right.
Uh, and I explained to you exactly what it is that I envisioned that I would like. And then you mentioned BusPlanner workflow. And I
Mm-hmm.
told you, no, that's not really like what I want. And you said, Chris, this does exactly that. I'm going to send you information. And I went through a small presentation that was given to me, and I said, "Well, okay," because I was envisioning Google Forms. I've gone to other school districts to see how they handle requests, and the most advanced I saw was Google Forms, parents requesting transportation. And as everybody knows, there's no, parents could mistype the ID number. You don't know who's requesting it, and you know, it's a very it goes straight to a spreadsheet.
Right.
So we started out with the first couple of forms, getting them designed. I had a total of 5 forms, and then when I saw what it could do, like my eyes opened up. And you look at my forms. My forms are very elaborate, very intelligent forms, not because I made them, but because the staff at BusPlanner has folks that take your vision and they make it to the next level. Like if a parent is requesting transportation and they're assigned already to a bus, it's going to show them their bus information. They're not even going to submit their request because their child is already assigned. They don't know that the school already requested it for them. Um, there are certain parameters, user-defined fields that appear when schools request transportation for students that appear. So it's not a one-way communication. This is a very intelligent uh, way of requesting work to be done,
Right.
right? Where you can have it'll verify addresses for certain requests. We use the forms, for example, for alternate stop requests where special
Mm-hmm.
education students want uh, a stop at a daycare or at their grandparents' house, and you can have the system verify that the address is legitimate. We also have forms for space available, right? Where students that aren't eligible request transportation. Well, our form will actually require them to put the route number, and it'll give them what the run is if they want the morning, and they have to select all of the existing bus stops. And it'll actually tell them if there is stop on that bus run. And we also have it going that if there's more than 50 students assigned onto that bus, it turns red and asks them to verify whether there's space on that bus. That's how elaborate we've got our forms at this point. So yeah, we have a lot of forms. We've worked on improving the forms. I'm sure I'm going to have a few more forms created. One of the last forms that we created was actually the last 2 forms is a driver accolade form where parents or schools can actually send an accolade with a nice picture. They could choose what picture they want, and we present it to the bus driver, and bus drivers have been really happy to receive them. Another form that we just created online is to suspend bus service or to our parents to request to remove their student from the bus. So if you have a student, a special education student that's not going to be going to school for 2 or 3 weeks, now the parent or the school can request us to suspend that service. Now my driver doesn't have to drive 2 or 3 miles or 5 miles to go pick up a student for a few weeks. Um, those are all forms that make our job a lot easier, and most importantly provides the communication that somebody made that request and that it's going to be fulfilled. Those are all
Right.
things that couldn't be done before.
Right.
And
Right.
and I don't think everybody grasps the impact that it has in their operations until they deploy something like workflow and have their forms created. And folks give them the reaction, the stakeholders, the schools, the parents, and they tell you, this is the
Right.
greatest thing that's happened in our transportation department, surely for the routing department. Um,
Right.
Everybody tells me how great it is that we deployed this. And we did it in a very uh, concise way to make sure that all the stakeholders would be satisfied with it. We even demoed it with a couple of schools before we opened it up to all of them. And that's something that, as managing a project of this scope, uh, is critical to make sure that you get feedback.
Right, exactly. And just hearing you talk about this, it just goes back to again, what years ago, what I fell in love with about BusPlanner is just, how it's just such a breath of fresh air, right? And what we want to do. I mean, just listening to stories from people like you who have just been able to do so much in their operation, and and you're just starting to scratch the surface. You're going
Yep.
to start doing more and more things, and it just comes to mind. And that's what we want to do. We just want to help people, just like you're on here today to help people yourself, and just tell your story. And that's all we want to do at Bus Planner ourselves, and those of us that have been into it. And so, we've got a couple of events coming up, over the next month, and that are open to anyone who wants to learn more about Bus Planner. We're going to be doing a lunch and learn in Florida on December 11th, there in Kissimmee, there at another one of our partner sites, School District of Osceola County. And, that's open to anyone who wants to learn more about Bus Planner. And we're going to also be doing one on December the 3rd in North Carolina, and right outside of Greensboro, there at Guilford County Schools, one of our other partners in that. So yeah, just really, come out and learn to us. And I would also like to say that for those of you that are listening in, Chris has graciously offered to share some of his work that he's done in workflow. And so if you would like to see some of his forms, and as he talks through them in more depth than he has today, please feel free to reach out to us here at sales@busplanner.com, and we would love to get you in connection with some of that, what he's done there at Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So with that, I would like to open the floor up to questions that you all may have for Chris here on the call. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Caleb, feel free to put your question in the chat box, and we're happy to address that question.
And any
Binford,
of you
Chris,
others?
does it make sense? Yeah, does it make sense to go through an example? I know Chris went through a few examples of forms that he's used. Does it make sense to spend a couple minutes on, Chris, maybe one or two additional forms that have been particularly helpful for you guys?
You
Yeah,
want me to talk about some of the forms I have?
yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. I mean, I could tell you, I'm going to pull up my forms just so
so
some of the forms that we've created are specific to certain time periods. So we created forms that are for summer school because the students that attend summer school are not necessarily going to the schools that they're assigned to, but we need to know what their sending school is, what the feeder and what the receiving schools are. So we created custom forms for summer. One of the forms that I could tell you about in the state of Florida, we have what's called Gabby's Law, which is for hazardous walk students,
mhm.
where you're supposed to keep a record of any requests that parents or anybody in the public makes about a hazardous area, which is generally there's 4 criteria for those hazardous areas. And you're supposed to keep that. You're supposed to have a method of keeping it stored in case anybody requests it in the future. Well, there is no method available. So BusPlanner created our hazardous walk form, which we have, and parents are able to select the location and which criteria based on the Florida statute that they feel it qualifies as a hazardous walk. And it could be that there's more than 4,000 vehicles crossing on an intersection. There's 360 vehicles if it's not a controlled area, lack of a walkway. So they select those, and now parents can make that request, and we're able to go and view to see if it qualifies and approve or deny it. And now we at least are complying with the state statute. I mentioned earlier the space available request. That's always been an issue for us, and this has really simplified that process because it takes it to where the schools have a handle on whether it's space available, not the routing department or operations. So when the school requests it, they're actually the ones making that approval, and they're the ones actually checking to see if there's space on the bus. So we've really minimized the operational issues for space available. And it also has full notification of the criteria, right? The same thing
Yeah,
with our alternate stops requests. That's another form that we've created for all of the ESE students, and they have to request that every single year. We
that's awesome.
also Another pet peeve that a lot of transportation center and routing staff has is everybody wants to have a bus stop closer to their home, and they want to move the bus stop. So we actually created a form that is request to move, add, or review a bus stop location, and they're able to make that request directly. So we have a lot of forms. I mean, every transportation department has uh, similar requests. So we've tried to make one for practically everything.
That's awesome. Hey, Chris, Caleb has a question. He's asking, how big is your fleet, and did you reorganize your fleet once you started using BusPlanner?
Okay, so our bus fleet, our actual physical bus fleet is 1,000 buses. We have roughly at any given time, we have about 700 and something bus routes, 720 bus routes, let's say. Uh, we didn't reshuffle our fleet around because we have 7 bus compounds. So some are large, some are small. We've moved bus routes around based on how many drivers a bus compound may have, because uh, our labor force is unionized, and you can't just move our bus drivers from one location to another. What has had an impact as far as adding buses is adding electric buses, where we've had to put charging terminals. And I think we have about 50 buses, electric buses right now in our fleet. So workflow, what it has allowed us to do is primarily reduce the bus stops, reduce the bus runs, and uh, help us further fine tune reducing bus routes. Um, but yeah, that's basically been it. And you also have better access to data by looking uh, at workflow, because you're able to see what route technicians are receiving the most requests
Mhm.
and what type of requests are coming in.
That's great. Hopefully that answers your question there, Caleb. We have another one from Ashley. Each year, do you start with a clean slate for stops, or does each parent have to request a new transportation request for a new year, or do they carry over from the previous year?
Right. That's actually a very good question, because I know school districts do things a little bit differently, and I've asked that same question. Okay, so about traditionally, we've always left all students that are assigned year over year. So it's a running thing from cradle to grave. So students about eight before 8 years ago, what we would do is we would assign 100% of all students, and we would run reports of how many unassigned ESE students, unassigned magnet students, unassigned No Child Left Behind students, and the routing staff during the summer would have to assign 100% of the students. We do not delete all of our bus stops. We don't delete all of our bus runs year over year. We just don't have the staff to be able to do that. I know it takes a lot of work to do that. What we do here is we only assign the students that request transportation. But what happens here is we have 180 elementary schools. Very rare do you have a regular elementary school student that is eligible for transportation, because you have to be over 2 miles to be eligible, and most elementary schools are within a mile and a half of every student. But if you are, then we make sure that you are assigned when you go to middle school. We also, and most of my route technicians are the ones that handle this. We assign 100% of all the incoming sixth graders that are going to middle school if there is a bus stop near them, an existing bus stop. We also assign 100% of the ninth graders that are eligible for a bus if there is a bus stop near them that we could assign them to without creating a new bus stop. Uh, we also assign um, all the students that request transportation, right, during the summer. We do school messenger phone calls to all eligible students every Tuesday or Wednesday at night, letting them know that they're eligible for a bus, to press 1 if they would like to receive a bus stop. If they press 1, we import that data into BusPlanner Pro, and we start assigning those students as well. So the quick answer is no, we don't delete everything. Our data stays the same, and a lot of times students will be in all of high school on the same bus route number.
Gotcha. There's a couple more here, Chris. One is, how did you reduce bus stops using workflow?
Okay, so before we would use the state census reports as our data point, right? And remember, we've only been with BusPlanner 4 years, 5 years. So before, this was done with a lot of paperwork. We would find out what bus stops had 0 students on them, and we would eliminate those bus stops. And then we would take a look at all the bus runs and try to join them together, collapse them together, condense them. And then we would use that data. Our route managers would go through and minimize the number of bus routes. So if you figure, we started out with 1,270 bus routes about 8 or 9 years ago when we started doing this. We would reduce maybe 60, 70 bus routes every single year. It wasn't a big cut. It was 60, 70 every single year. I expect our bus route cuts to be a lot smaller. We're going to go through a wholesale mandatory bell time change. So that may change how we do things, because high school has to start earlier than elementary. So that may change things around. But within BusPlanner, now we just finished our October state census. We're going to import that into BusPlanner and go through the same process. We're going to see what bus stops have 0 count and eliminate them. And, we don't always get it right. We sometimes eliminate stops that may have a student, and we put that back. And sometimes condensing things doesn't work, and we put it back. But generally, it's worked year over year for us.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
And
Hey, Chris.
and let
Yeah,
me
go
just
ahead.
say, workflow is a critical part of that, because now parents are forced to request transportation and schools are forced to request it. So when we receive that, we assign the students, and now that student load on that bus stop goes back to normal.
Hmm.
Gotcha. Um, we have a question here. Has Bus Planner helped with driver retention?
By making our routes a lot better, a lot cleaner, it has helped with driver retention, but it's not something that's quantifiable. Driver retention is a problem here for many reasons. You have the labor rate that they're paid, and we have like three Amazon warehouses that hire our drivers. We also have the county. So we train our drivers, and they go once they get their CDL. So I'm having the best routes possible, the best designed routes, and having runs that are 25, 26 bus stops. I could see how drivers would leave because they don't want to have to deal with a bus run like that. So driver retention is always going to be a problem. Um, I don't have the holy grail solution for that, and um, if somebody did, it would be great to present it.
Well, if anything, Chris, so in the volume of routes that you all have been able to reduce, that in itself, that is
Yes,
quantifiable, and
true,
25% less drivers that you're having to try to fill. So
correct.
there are different
And
ways to look at it.
and Yeah, and the tablets have also helped because we're providing them
Hmm.
GPS information and student information, and it's made their job uh, somewhat easier. Anything you can do to make their job easier, for sure. I'm in the routing department, so I really don't have contact with bus drivers. But we did just deploy improved census reports that have drivers have provided positive feedback. So there's been a lot of things that we've done since we've migrated to BusPlanner that has provided positive feedback directly from the drivers. In fact, our driver accolade form that I was talking about earlier, the drivers that have received them have been very happy to get
Hmm.
any kind of accolade because it is in many ways a thankless job, right?
Mhm.
It's people we should never take them for granted the job that they do.
Chris, we have a question here, follow-up question. Additionally, how was your transition from the old system? What was the hardest part, and how well did your team accept the new methods?
Yeah, so I mentioned our employees are mainly they've been here in the department for 25 years, a lot longer than I have. Um, Initially, it was very difficult because it was difficult when we went to our previous vendor, and that's when I first started, right? My history is that I came from Bell South AT&T, and it has nothing to do with transportation, but I was hired to help with that transition. And uh, I remember a lot of the folks didn't even know what a mouse was. So as folks had retired, and we've gone from, when I first started, there was almost 30 route technicians. Um, it was very difficult for them to go from the previous system to the system that replaced it using computers, to go from our previous system to BusPlanner. Uh, Everybody knew the basics of creating bus stops and bus runs using uh, software, routing software. And the level of training that we received was more than sufficient, right? So everybody took a very collaborative effort to learning the software. So actually going live with the schools, it became something that was very painless. It was actually a lot more painless than I expected, because at that time, uh, and Binford will probably smile, and I tell him I was a skeptic. I was very. We went to one or two school districts that had the software, and the software, you're used to one software, you go to another. It was very. I was a skeptic, and he told me, Chris, you got to trust me. You're going to thank me. And I've thanked him multiple times uh, because as far as Bus Planner Pro, it's an excellent software, and it um, compared to what we have, it was an improvement. What took it to the next level was the other softwares that tie into uh, Bus Planner Pro that we're using that have made other departments' jobs easier. Um, I didn't want to really get into because we do use workflow, and to me, workflow has been the biggest game changer in our use of Bus Planner Pro. Um, but I know that other departments have also deployed uh, like fleet management type software and things like that. And I've heard the feedback, and it's been great. But that all ties into the people that Bus Planner has providing support, as opposed to where we've had previous vendors for fleet management, and you don't move from one software to another unless you're not happy. Um, and we've moved to other software applications uh, with Bus Planner because of the fact that we've received support, and every time that we've needed uh, training or assistance, like for example, I'll send out an email and then I get a 1 hour Zoom training on how to do certain things that before we could never do. So for us, it's been seamless. Uh, and I know I say that a lot, but I mean it. I mean, you know, we have an issue. Um, there's an issue bigger than switching routing software. there's a lot of, you're talking about a year and a half process of getting a map that's complicated like Miami-Dade County's GIS information. And by the time you're deploying it, that map is probably outdated. So your mapping staff is going to start adding and modifying and things like that. So it involves a lot of people. Uh, for us with BusPlanner, it really became painless.
And for us, that's just how we roll it with any district. It doesn't matter, who you are, how big or how little. We have always excelled to do that for anyone that's come with us. Because
I think
again, until you're successful, we're not.
I think what I tell Binford and what I tell other folks is that Miami-Dade County Public Schools were always treated uh, as if we are your only customer. So to my knowledge, we're the only ones using BusPlanner Pro because I'm like when I deal with somebody at BusPlanner, they know exactly what when I talk about transfer codes or I talk about all of these other codes or primary, it's like they know exactly what I'm talking about. They know and other school districts probably don't even have that. Uh, for those that don't know, Miami-Dade County Public Schools has a very strange bell time schedule. Uh, when you get to elementary, we have different bell times in the morning, whether you're kindergarten and first grader, and we have different bell times in the afternoon. We drop off at 1:50 and at 3 o'clock, and then on Wednesday, everybody gets out at 1:50. Try routing that in software, and you see how difficult it becomes. Um, so we do things very different, but when I speak to them, whoever it is I speak with, they understand exactly what's going on. So, Bus Planner, the support portion of it is unparalleled, you could say.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I know
Awesome.
we're over time here. We have one more question that if we can do that, guys, and then we'll wrap up here. So how do you handle school of choice routing with BusPlanner?
Right. So, school of choice, we have several things that happen. We have roughly about 60, 70, 80 schools that consider themselves schools of choice. And when you say schools of choice, I'm thinking you're saying magnet schools. Every single magnet school has a different way that their students are eligible for transportation. Some of them have what's called transportation service zones, where regardless of the grade level, if you belonged in the boundary of 20 or 30 elementary schools that have been predetermined, you're eligible for transportation. Other schools have a boundary, a separate boundary, a contiguous boundary based on, certain geographical areas, right? Other schools have depot stops, and other schools have metro rail, right? Transfer stops. Um, because our route technicians have 20, 25, some have close almost 30 schools assigned to them. They basically are the master of their domain. I tell my routing specialists, you are the supervisor of those 25, 30 schools, and you need to be a specialist on everything that goes on within that school, um, and know exactly how to manage those schools and their transportation. Within Bus Planner, I'm able to go, and if I pull up a student and they're within that magnet boundary and they have the transfer code that defines them as a magnet student, Bus Planner actually coordinates that student to the boundary and lets me know whether they're eligible to receive a bus or not. Bus Planner does 95% of that work of letting me know whether they're eligible. The schools that have depot stops, they go into workflow. That's where workflow comes in again. The parents are able to see the 75, 80 bus stops, depending on the program that they're eligible for, and they are able to directly receive the bus stop. The schools are able to do the same exact thing. Workflow is very tied into Bus Planner Pro because um, the way that workflow works is that it knows what stop to look at to define it as a bus stop for that program. All of that was done when we would design the forms. And
Right.
again, the software is very intelligent. work that was done very collaboratively. It wasn't done in a vacuum by BusPlanner. It's not a general form. This is very customizable from the email to the message that appears to everything. It's not a generic solution. It's something that when you enable it, there are steps that that you would take as an administrator to make sure that all the stakeholders are properly informed. It's something that I did beforehand, uh, so that when they look at it, they know exactly what to do. We actually trained all of the school sites at 3 different locations over a 6-week period. We created videos for each form showing exactly how each form works, so that when school started, there was zero confusion. There was zero complaints. Nobody was surprised, and it was a full embrace of the system.
Right. So, Chris, again, want to thank you so much. We had a question there at the end. I know we're over time. Everybody's really busy. We had a question about the Florida Lunch and Learn, so I'm going to put that back up there. But again, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been
Thank
very,
you.
very beneficial for everyone, and for those of you that are listening in. Again, thank you for taking the time to dial in out of your busy schedules to hear Chris and his stories there with
And,
Miami-Dade County Public Schools and what
and,
they've done with BusPlanner.
and Binford, before we go, I just wanted
Yes.
to let everybody know, I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening, that as with all of our transportation centers, the more that we know, the more we have to learn.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing, that all of us are in this together of helping students. And this happens to be on workflow. I happen to be fortunate enough that you asked me to sit in on this. I'm more than welcome to ever help anybody that contacts Dade County Public Schools to let you know like what we do. But I learned just as much as everybody else through all of these sessions. So I want to thank everybody for sitting through this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Chris,
sir.
this was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Take care,
All
everyone.
right.
Thank you so
Bye
much,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.